Hello everyone, ocean professionals, scientists and explorers. It's great to be with you today, even if it's only over video. My name's Jamie McMichael-Phillips and I'm the director of the Nippon Foundation Jebco Seabed 2030 project. Whilst Seabed 2030 is gaining more visibility and recognition, especially now it's been endorsed as a UN Decade Action, I see today as an opportunity to invite all of you on this journey of exploration. So let me start with the boring bit, me. So I'm a hydrographic surveyor by training and former Royal Navy mariner, and I've been heading up the Seabed 2030 project since December 2019. Prior to that, I've held senior geospatial roles not only in the Royal Navy, but also for a number of years at the UK Hydrographic Office. And for nearly a decade, I chaired an international hydrographic organisation working group where I had the privilege of leading an intergovernmental team of experts monitoring and advising on global chart coverage to support safe navigation. And that's how I came to know this passionate group of scientists, mapping professionals and explorers who work on the General Bathymetric Chart of the Oceans, or GEBCO for short. They don't get much publicity, but their mission is as ambitious as the space program once was, and that is to build a complete map of the world's ocean floors that will be available for all to use. So let me give you a brief history of Jebco. It was born from the Commission on Suboceanic Nomenclature, which was convened in Wiesbaden in 1903 and chaired by Prince Albert I of Monaco. And he was really the driving force behind the Jebco chart until his death in 1922. The project was eventually taken up by the International Hydrographic Organization, which now manages the project jointly with the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, IOC. So, when the 5th edition of the chart was published in 1982, it was under the auspices of both the IHO and the IOC. Initially hand-drawn sounding sheets like this one from 1931 had to be carefully collated and added manually to charts. In the 1990s, charting began to go digital. We saw the creation of the IHO's Data Centre for Digital Bathymetry, and Jebco mapping also went digital. But then it relied on, as it does to this very day, on the data contribution made by governments, shipping companies and researchers like yourselves. So indeed, as a young bridge watchkeeper and hydrographic surveyor in the Royal Navy, I spent many hours gathering and preparing transit bathymetry to be sent off to Jebco. And I'm immensely proud to say that my data, and also my other data from safety of navigation surveys, particularly in remote areas, has filled in some of the holes in the Jebco grid. But I'm here today to ask you to help us fill in the rest. You're all experts and you know how vast our oceans are. 362 million square kilometres, or 3/4 of the Earth's surface. So even with all the technological advances we've made, most of our ocean remains a black hole in terms of directly measured seabed mapping. Indeed, we know more about the surface of the Moon and Mars than we do of our own planet's ocean floors. But why is that? Well, one reason is technology. The satellites that give us detailed imagery and topographic data of every inch of the Earth's land area are unable to penetrate the water column and provide accurate data on the contours of the sea floor. For generations, we've measured the depth of the ocean floor using a variety of sounding devices. Some streamed over the side of vessels, and whilst admirable, like the Lucas sounding machine seen here deployed from HMS Egeria in 1897, they could only provide very narrow and inaccurate data measurements. Helpful for navigation, but not much else. The arrival of sonar was a major breakthrough, but it was really multi-beam sonar that opened up the possibility of gathering large swaths of data in one pass. But even with multi-beam sonar arrays, it can take a ship more than 200 years to complete the task to map the ocean floor. And that task is monumental, which brings us to the second reason we don't have a complete chart of the oceans. With so many urgent needs on land, it has been easy for people who are not focused on the oceans, unlike those of us who are here today, to simply ignore the fact that so much of our planet is unexplored. In fact, most people probably assume that those lovely blue areas on a Google map are just as well charted as the brown bits, but they're not. And that's where our project comes in. Seabed 2030, first developed at the 2016 Forum for Future Ocean Floor Mapping. is a collaboration between the Nippon Foundation and Jebco to cooperatively work towards mapping 100% of the world's ocean floor by the year 2030. The project was launched at the 2017 Ocean Conference by Mr. Yohei Sasakawa, the chairman of the Nippon Foundation, and at that point the Jebco grid depicted about 6% of the oceans that had been mapped to an adequate resolution. We're now entering the 5th year of operation, and spurred on by the vision, strategy and driving force of its founding leadership, the Nippon Foundation and Jebco, the Seabed 2030 project team has delivered the 2021 release of the Jebco grid, showing 20.6% of the ocean floor mapped, a significant increase. I've been with the project less than 2 years, so the credit for this must go to others in the Seabed 2030 project team, and of course our network of data contributors. So by setting an ambitious and urgent goal of creating a publicly available, complete bathymetric chart of the world's oceans by the end of the decade, Mr. Sasakawa and the Nippon Foundation have tasked us with the goal of accelerating the Jebco programme and placing ocean floor mapping firmly on the global agenda. But we need to keep that initiative front of mind amongst policymakers, amongst scientists and amongst professionals, and in particular the community upon whose data we greatly rely. The Seabed 2030 organisation has developed steadily over the years. The team consists of 26 people, not all full-time, across 7 international locations and 5 centres. We're encouraged by, but we're actively encouraging the development and use of new technologies such as uncrewed surface vessels and satellite-derived bathymetry. The uncrewed vessel, as you can see behind me, is operating in Plymouth Sound, yet it's being controlled in an ops room based in Essex, so the other side of the United Kingdom. Absolutely amazing. The aspect that we're interested in is something we're calling the Two Oceans, Two Technologies Transit. This is the Atlantic component, and we're going to use similar technology in the Pacific.
And what we have is a remarkable new sailing vessel, the Saildrone Surveyor, a 72-foot or 21, 22 meter long vessel that is totally uncrewed. It left San Francisco last week. It's on its way to Hawaii. It has a very sophisticated deep water mapping system on it, EM304, capable of mapping to depths of 5, 6, 7,000 meters. And we're getting real-time input from the vessel. On the middle screen here, we can see the swath mapping data coming in. We have a mission planner that's coming from Saildrone on the right screen, and you can see the progress, that blue swath you see, the progress of the vessel. And we're grateful that the Nippon Foundation has allowed us to demonstrate this capability and hopefully set the way for the future of ocean mapping.
I believe that in the very near future, this type of new vessel, based on this type of new technology, will be surveying huge areas of our oceans and, crucially, at a much lower cost financially and environmentally. Groundbreaking technologies like these are going to play a vital role as we meet our ambitious goal by the end of the decade. But it's partnering up with commercial, scientific and government organisations that has been the most fruitful source of data for us so far. Fugro, for example, is one of the world's largest survey companies, and it has been sharing bathy data from multi-beam sonar arrays installed in some of its vessels.
We have collected and donated to the organization 2 million square kilometers of geoscience bathymetry data. Ocean science data is what we collect every day, and we felt the connection to the program, to the initiative to further expand on understanding the oceans is really important, and it also brings us very close to the heart of our ultimate purpose, which is creating a safe and livable world. So I would also call out for anybody out there in the industry to help the Seabed 2030 initiative, like Fugro does, donating the data that you already collect, or maybe helping actively to collect more information in the near future. It's really important. Everybody should contribute here.
We're grateful to have NGO partners like Caladan Oceanic.
ISS, this is DSSV pressure drop. Kathy Sullivan on this end. We read you loud and clear. Victor Vescovo, the pilot of Limiting Factor, and I are back on the surface ship at this point. Looked a little more like the moonscape than anything I've seen on this planet so far. So we spent about an hour and a half on the bottom, rendezvoused with one of our autonomous landers.
Kathy is the first astronaut to go down to the bottom of the ocean, so we're very proud of her, and the first woman.
And the Schmidt Ocean Institute, who are out at sea making incredible discoveries whilst also helping us fill gaps in the grid.
So this current seafloor to seabirds expedition in the Coral Sea Marine Park aims to map the seafloor at a high resolution towards the Jebco Nippon Foundation Seabed 2030 project, and also observe magnetic anomalies that we find in the ocean basin that opened here around 90 million years ago. One really important feature in this region is the Kaito Trough, which is the connection between the North Tasman and the South Coral Seas. And it's a really undersurveyed region, so we're hoping that with the data that we're collecting during this voyage, which is seafloor bathymetric data, but also magnetic data, that we can, first of all, find the mid-ocean ridge along which this basin opened, but then also understand the geomorphology and all the processes that took place during the geologic history of this complex region.
Filling those gaps is more urgent than ever. Whilst many people may be too preoccupied by the pressing issues on land, I'm sure I don't need to tell you that the shape of the seabed is key to understanding how ocean current circulation affects climate change, weather patterns, how inflows of warmer waters destabilise glaciers, affecting sea level rise. The shape of the seabed is a crucial parameter in forecasting and assessing the impact of tsunami wave propagation and of underwater geohazards such as earthquakes, landslides, rising fluids and gases, volcanic eruptions and coastal erosion. We know that we have 10 years left to prevent irreversible damage from climate change. The importance of our oceans is clearly recognised by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 14 and, more recently, in the proclamation by the United Nations of the Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. A fully mapped ocean, supported by adequate bathymetry, is the golden thread that weaves through the challenges, actions and outcomes of the UN decade. Looking ahead, what will be the main points of focus for the Seabed 2030 project and our community of stakeholders over the coming years? First of all, we need to keep building links and strengthening the connections between the private sector, international, regional and localised seabed mapping initiatives, shipping companies, academia and governments. Seabed 2030 is a relatively small initiative, but the networks and partnerships it can build have a huge potential for impact, a force for good. And secondly, a topic very close to my own heart, Seabed 2030 has a responsibility to bring together the community of mapping professionals. If not in person at the moment, then at least virtually. And that's not just amongst the Jebco community and our own talented ocean mapping alumni, but much more widely. There is still so much untapped knowledge and experience amongst the professionals spread all around the world. And bringing this community together and building networks will give us a better overview of mapping efforts that are underway, but will also stimulate new mapping initiatives and new technologies. Equally importantly, it will underscore the huge value to humanity of achieving a fully mapped ocean. Thirdly, there should be a focus on making crowdsourced bathymetry and transit bathymetry a normal part of any activity at sea. Switching on the echo sounder to generate new data should become embedded in everyday bridge and science routines. With just under a decade to make it happen by 2030, I'm sure that the next 10 years of the journey will be equally as exciting as the first 5 have been, not least because the UN Decade for Ocean Science has just started and its end will coincide with the deadline for the Seabed 2030 mission. There will undoubtedly be new technology to be absorbed. The impact of uncrewed or lightly crewed vessels on a larger scale. Mapping in uncharted territories will continue to grow. Crowdsourced or community-sourced bathymetry will become an established form of data gathering for the common good, and the private sector will continue to help us drive this trend. But let's not forget the people outside of the maritime community, the general public, who will gain an even better understanding and appreciation of the importance of the ocean in our everyday lives. So it's my privilege to be steering the ship, and that ship is the Nippon Foundation Jebco Seabed 2030 project, and I'm steering it into this new decade. And if nothing else, the scientists and other professionals involved in the project are living proof that the passionate pursuit of a common goal, in this case mapping the seabed, can have a great impact. Seabed 2030 is really paying dividends, not to shareholders, but to everybody, from citizens to governments and to academia, and ultimately to humanity as a whole. So I'd like to finish by encouraging all of you to think about new ways to spread the word and to further extend our Seabed 2030 mapping community, and also, crucially, to gather bathymetry where and when you're able. In fact, crowdsourced or perhaps community-sourced bathymetry is a growing trend. There are countless vessels, from container ships to cruise ships to recreational craft, all fitted with echo sounders and all with the ability to continuously add new data sets, gathered in appropriate water depths of course, but to those already used by Jebco. So our mission is to grow this armada of friendly vessels and get more contributors collecting online. Thank you.